You think you know how Matt Armstrong managed to get his hands on the Bugatti Veyron, but the real story behind it is far more complex than what most people believe. On the surface, it looks like just another high-end car purchase from a successful automotive creator, but behind the scenes, there was a chain of events, decisions, and hidden involvement that made this entire deal possible in the first place. And if even one of those elements had gone differently, this car might never have ended up where it did. Matt Armstrong has built a reputation for doing things most people would consider impossible. He takes cars that others would call total losses and turns them into fully working machines again. That's the identity people associate with him now. But the Bugatti Veyron wasn't just another rebuild or restoration project. This was something on an entirely different level. It wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about acquiring one of the most iconic hypercars ever made, and that comes with a completely different world of complexity. To understand how this happened, you have to understand how deals like this work in the real automotive world. These are not simple transactions where you see a car, like it, and buy it, especially not when it comes to something like a Bugatti Veyron. Cars like this move through a very small and very private network of collectors, brokers, and intermediaries. There are layers of negotiation that never reach the public eye. Prices fluctuate based on condition, history, ownership chain, and even timing in the market. And most importantly, access matters more than money in many cases. In Matt's case, the Veyron wasn't sitting in a showroom waiting for a buyer. It was part of a more complicated situation involving ownership transitions and private discussions that were already ongoing before he even became involved. At that level of automotive trade, cars are often spoken about long before they are publicly available. And by the time most people hear about them, decisions are already in motion behind scenes. What very few people realize is that Matt himself was not directly handling every part of this deal alone. There was someone working quietly in the background, someone who understood both sides of the equation. Not a public figure, not someone who would appear in videos or take credit, but someone who had the right connections to bring the opportunity forward. In high-value car deals like this, that role is often the difference between success and failure. Without the right introduction or timing, even the most interested buyer can completely miss out. At one point during the process, things were not as smooth as they may seem in hindsight. There were discussions that didn't immediately align. Expectations about condition and pricing did not fully match between both sides. And in situations like this, it doesn't take much for a deal to collapse completely. High-value sellers often have multiple potential buyers, and if one negotiation becomes complicated, they simply move on to the next. This is where the hidden connector became important. The role wasn't to change the value of the car or force a decision, but to bridge the gap between two perspectives. One side was looking at a Veyron as a project with risk, the other side as a rare opportunity with strong value. Aligning those viewpoints is often more difficult than arranging the money itself. And slowly, through back-and-forth communication and timing adjustments, the gap started to close. From the outside, it might look like a straightforward purchase once everything is announced publicly. But in reality, these moments are the result of weeks or even months of silent coordination. By the time the audience sees the final reveal, most of the difficult parts have already happened behind closed doors. That's why it often feels surprising when people hear about these acquisitions, because they are only seeing the final 5% of the entire process. Eventually, everything aligned. The conditions were agreed upon, the logistics were handled, and the Veyron moved from being just another complex listing in the background of the car world to becoming part of Matt Armstrong's journey. But even at that point, it wasn't just about owning the car. It was about what the car represented. The Bugatti Veyron is not just a vehicle. It's a symbol of engineering, performance, and automotive history. And bringing something like that into a rebuild-focused creator's world changes the scale of everything. What makes this story even more interesting is that most people will never know the full chain of involvement that made it possible. The public sees Matt, the content, the rebuilds, and the final product. But behind moments like this, there are always unseen contributors who play key roles without ever being mentioned. And in this case, that hidden involvement was one of the main reasons the deal even reached completion. Because without that coordination, without that timing, and without that silent negotiation support, the situation could have easily gone in a completely different direction. The Veyron might have gone to another buyer, or the deal might have stalled indefinitely in discussion stages. That's how fragile these high-end automotive transactions really are. And that brings us back to the bigger question. How many other deals in the car world are happening like this right now, completely hidden from public view? How many vehicles change hands through unseen negotiations, with silent facilitators making everything possible without ever being acknowledged? The truth is, the automotive world at this level is not just about cars. It's about people, timing, trust, and invisible networks that keep everything moving. And the Matt Armstrong Veyron purchase is just one example of how complex and layered that world really is. And once you understand that, the entire story of this Veyron starts to feel very different. Because from the outside, people naturally assume it's just another big-budget purchase, a successful creator, a famous build channel, and enough money to buy a hypercar. But the reality is far more layered than that simple explanation. Even after the deal was agreed and everything was technically done, the process was not actually finished. Cars like the Bugatti Veyron don't just move from one owner to another like a normal vehicle. There are checks, documentation, verification processes, and transport arrangements that all have to be handled carefully. And at this level, even a small delay or mistake can create complications that take days or weeks to fix. During this phase, coordination becomes even more important, because now it's not about negotiating the price anymore, it's about execution. Getting the car safely transferred, making sure every detail matches the agreement, and ensuring there are no misunderstandings between any party involved. This is where most people underestimate how much work happens behind the scenes. The public only sees the moment the car appears in a video or when it's revealed in a garage. But before that moment, there are dozens of small decisions that had to go exactly right. In Matt Armstrong's case, the Veyron didn't just represent another project. It represented a turning point. A step into a completely different category of automotive content. Because a car like this doesn't just bring attention, it brings expectations. People don't just want to see it. They want to see what happens next, how it will be handled, whether it will be restored, modified, or preserved in its original form. And that pressure changes everything. Because now every decision matters more. Every detail is analyzed. Every update becomes content that thousands or even millions of people will judge. That's why acquisitions like this are not just financial decisions. They are strategic decisions for a creator's entire direction. And that brings us back again to the hidden element in this story. The part that never gets shown on camera. The quiet involvement of people who make introductions, smooth conversations, and ensure that the right information reaches the right hands at the right time. Without that invisible structure, a deal like this can easily fall apart long before it ever becomes public. What makes this even more interesting is that most of these individuals prefer it this way. They don't seek recognition. They don't appear in videos. Their role is simply to make things happen. And once it's done, they step away from the spotlight completely. So when people ask the question, how did Matt Armstrong actually get the Veyron? The honest answer is not one single moment or one single decision. It's a combination of timing, connections, negotiations, trust, and silent coordination that most viewers will never see. And maybe that's what makes the story more fascinating, because it reminds us that behind every viral moment, there's usually a long chain of unseen effort that holds everything together. Even now, long after the purchase has been completed and the car is part of his journey, the deepest story behind how it actually came together remains something only a few people truly understand. And that's exactly why it continues to attract attention. Because the Real story was never just about buying a Bugatti Veyron. It was about how many invisible steps it takes for something like that to even become possible in the first place. And that is exactly what most people miss when they watch the final reveal. They see the car, they see the name, they see the success, but they don't see the chain of moments that had to align perfectly for it to exist in the first place. Because in reality, deals like this don't happen because one person simply decides to buy something expensive. They happen because multiple paths cross at the exact right time. The right people speak, the right information is shared, and the right opportunity is not missed when it appears. And in the case of Matt Armstrong's Veyron, everything came together in a way that looks almost simple on the surface, but is actually extremely complex underneath. That's why this story feels so different compared to normal car content. It's not just about a hypercar purchase. It's about how hidden systems in the automotive world actually work when high-value machines change hands. It also shows something important about the industry that most viewers never think about. For every car that gets publicly revealed, there are many others that never make it to that stage. Deals that fall apart, negotiations that end silently, opportunities that disappear before the audience ever hears about them. So when this Veyron finally appeared under Matt Armstrong's name, it wasn't just a moment of success. It was a result of everything going exactly right behind the scenes without public attention. And maybe that's the real reason this story got so much interest. Because it doesn't just show a car, it shows the invisible process behind how moments like this are actually created. Now, the question is not just how this Veyron was bought. The real question is, how many other unbelievable stories are happening right now that nobody has seen yet? Because in the world of high-end automotive deals, what you see on camera is always the final chapter, not the full story. And that's why this one moment will keep people talking, long after the initial hype fades. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you already know what to do, because there are many more hidden stories just like this waiting to be uncovered. And the truth is, this might just be the beginning. Because once you step into this level of cars, everything changes. The deals get bigger, the risks get higher, and the stories behind them become even more unbelievable. What looks like a single purchase today could open the door to even crazier opportunities tomorrow. And if this Veyron deal needed this much hidden coordination, just imagine what it takes for the next one. So next time you see a car like this appear on screen, don't just look at the result. Think about what it took to get there, the conversations you never heard, the decisions you never saw, and the people who made it happen without ever being mentioned. Because sometimes the most important part of the story is a part that stays completely invisible. And that's exactly what makes this one different. Now, if you've made it this far, you already understand something most people don't. So here's something to think about. What if the biggest automotive stories aren't the ones being shown, but the ones still hidden behind the scenes? And maybe, just maybe, the next one is already in motion right now. So stay watching, because the story isn't over yet. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because once a deal like this becomes public, people start focusing on what comes next, the rebuild, the transformation, the content. But almost nobody goes back and asks the deeper question again. What really had to happen for this moment to even exist? Because when you rewind everything, strip it back to the beginning, you realize something important. This wasn't guaranteed. At multiple points, it could have gone wrong. The opportunity could have passed. The connection could have failed. The timing could have slipped just enough for someone else to step in. And if that had happened, this entire story you just watched wouldn't even exist. No video, no reveal, no Veyron in Matt Armstrong's hands. That's how close moments like this are to never happening at all. And that's what makes it powerful. Because success at this level isn't just about doing big things. It's about catching rare opportunities at the exact right second and having the right people around you to make sure you don't miss them. That's the part most people overlook. They see the final result and assume it was always going to happen. But in reality, it was one of many possible outcomes, and just one small shift could have changed everything. So the next time you see something like this, don't just scroll past it. Pause for a second, because what you're looking at is not just a car. It's timing, it's precision, it's decisions made under pressure, and a chain of events that had to go exactly right. And maybe the craziest part? This is just one story. There are dozens more like it happening right now, quietly, privately, behind closed doors, waiting for the right moment to come into the light. So if you've stayed with this till the very end, you're already ahead of most people. Because now you're not just watching the surface anymore. You're seeing the hidden layer behind it. And trust me, once you start noticing it, you'll never look at these moments the same way again. So keep your eyes open, because the next untold story might be even bigger than this one.